Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway, a podcast reserved for the spiritually curious. Journey further with Reiki Masters Kathleen Johnson and Andrea Kennedy through in-depth conversations, many featuring inspiring and intriguing special guests to enrich your unique spiritual progression.
Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. This is Kathleen with my co-host Andrea. And in this episode, we are welcoming back Jofa M. Kauffman. You may remember Jofa from previous episodes. She is a numerologist, a paranormal explorer, and the owner of Spirited Events by Jofa. And in this cool episode, she talks about her experiences escorting Andrea on Andrea's very first paranormal exploration of the infamously haunted Hillview Manor in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Together, Jofa and Andrea will share their experiences with me, including some intriguing recordings of voices from beyond. I was unfortunately unable to attend this event, much to my chagrin, but COVID had very different ideas about what I should be doing then. So I'm excited to hear about their experiences, and I'm hearing them for the first time, just like you will be as you listen to this episode.
Kathleen, we were really bummed that you couldn't make it, but I have to tell you, Jofa is really something. I was nervous, and I think I was going to use you for support, and to hang on to during the whole thing. And then with you not being there, I was a little extra nervous. But I have to say, Jofa, she's got her stuff together. She had it all laid out. She'd been to Hillview Manor before, but not only that, she was such a help with all the details of the trip. And that really helped put me at ease. So I was really so comfortable with her. She made it easy. And I wasn't so afraid of the paranormal because Jofa's so real, down to earth, and just easy to be with. So Jofa, we're thrilled to have you back. And this is a topic that I get a bit conflicted over. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that too. But can you share with the audience a little bit about Hillview Manor so that they can understand the setting of our adventure?
Well, first off, ladies, thank you again for having me back. As I mentioned before, when we talked about the paranormal, this is something I really get excited to discuss. And it was my thrill to take Andrea on her first time walking through the dark halls of Hillview Manor. This is a place, as you mentioned, I've been to several times before. It's located in northwestern Pennsylvania. It's an 80,000 square foot building, originally built in 1926, and it was called the Lawrence County Home for the Aged. Originally, it was built as like a poorhouse, or they called it a poor farm, and it was housed like the county's mentally ill, elderly residents, severely destitute, and a lot of these people had no other family members locally. So it opened its doors in 1926 and originally only had 20 residents. Unfortunately, they called them inmates, which I didn't really understand the purpose of that, but I will call them residents out of respect. So we spent a lot of time exploring the various levels of Hillview Manor. In 1960, they remodeled it and made it larger because it was starting to have some very overcrowding issues. So in 74, they began a whole new section. In 77, they opened that new wing. It was like a 3-story facility. And that's when they officially renamed it the Hillview Manor in 1977. And it operated as that up until 2004, when due to a lot of financial constraints, unfortunately, they needed to close the facility. So there's been many people that have lived and unfortunately also died there at the Hillview Manor, which I think allows for these spirits to sort of remain resident there, even beyond their physical death.
Yeah, what a history. It's close to 100 years it was in operation. And I'm kind of with Andrea on this. I'm a little conflicted about all these things because I feel such compassion and, a sense of sadness about the souls that spent some time there and drew their last breath there. So I do think it's important when we do these kinds of episodes to approach it from that standpoint, the compassion and the understanding and the respect, as you said, Jaffa. I think that's super important.
Absolutely. That's something I think that Andrea and I were very conscious of throughout our entire walkthrough of Hillview Manor. Those that are still remaining there or that come back to visit there, hopefully we treated them as we would anyone else that we would meet, with respect, with kindness, and just a real sense of curiosity to hear their personal stories.
And I think that's wonderful. That is the way to approach it. And I still feel that sense of sadness. I'm sure there are so many stories housed within that building. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the ones you encountered.
Absolutely. And I think you'll even hear some of them, particularly some of the recordings that we're going to talk about, sort of have a real sweet sense about them, almost a sense of humor. I'm excited to explain all of those to you and also to get Andrea's take again on the experience.
Absolutely, because in the moment, we didn't hear a lot. The recorders pick things up. And one of the things that surprised me, Jaffa, was that you'll listen back to your recording while we're there and see if something's there, which that makes total sense to me. But I never expected that. And I thought, oh my goodness, she's listening back. And then we would hear things and I could see the value of that because you would know, is something happening? It was validating and that kind of thing. And it helps us navigate through, well, maybe we should leave this area or stay or whatever that is. So just a little bit of a technical thing there. And about the conflict that we were talking about, we'll probably have listeners who think, well, what about crossing those spirits over and doing that kind of service? And I think we'll wrap up the episode with a little bit more about that. So if that's kind of on your mind, hang out with us and we'll cross that bridge a little bit later in the episode.
That sounds like a good plan, Andrea. Now, without further ado, I am really anxious to hear the account of your adventure, ladies. Tell me how it started. Where did you go? What did you do? And just dive in, please.
When we drove up, I actually thought it was kind of a small place because when you look at it from the front, it doesn't look that big, but it goes on. And like Jaffa said, it's 80,000 square feet. So once we got in there, oh my gosh, I was overwhelmed. And the other thing I thought was interesting was we had the entire place to ourselves. Now think about that.
Ooh.
I know there was a gentleman who sat at the very front of the facility in his little office because somebody's got to be there to let us in and see us off at the end. But he was right up front in his office, the entire facility, myself and Jaffa. That is it. No one else.
Oh my goodness. That in many ways makes it even a little more frightening.
Yeah. The other thing, the lights are off.
Of course they are.
Of course they are. So we had to have flashlights. So Jaffa helped me get equipped. I wore clothes I could just sit on the dirty floor in, sneakers. I got my own recorder. I was so excited, about that. So I took that, you got to get your tech, right? You got to be prepared. I had a flashlight and the whole thing. I was ready. And it wasn't until we got there and really went in that I realized, because the sun was setting as we went in, and I'll let Jaffa kind of give you the framework of the evening, what we did, how that started. But knowing no lights, that was a little bit freaky to me. The lights that were on were just at the exit doors, those red exit doors. So
right.
That cast that red glow in the hallways. That was kind of weird too. But all right. So Jaffa, I'll turn it over to you and let you just explain how the general thing goes. So we get there and then what happens?
We would have had the option to take a tour along with the gentleman that was there to give us some history. But having been there before and knowing my way around, we sort of opted to just dive right in.
Yeah.
So Andrea and we did take our flashlights. There was still sort of light outside because we began at 7 p.m. And we did take a quick little walkthrough. I wanted her to get a feel of what the layout was in some of the rooms, and then also let Andrea sort of tell me, what is she feeling in different areas? Where is she comfortable? Where wasn't she comfortable? I'm pleased to say that there was a couple areas where you mentioned being rather uncomfortable, and it's areas that I had felt the same thing at prior investigations. You didn't know anything about the history. You didn't know anything about my prior experiences there. So that was sort of validating. I thought that you were getting a good sense and picking up some sort of energy that wasn't quite normal or a little more high energy in those areas.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. And we went in this one area, I remember, and the rooms were smaller. It had a whole different layout. Our listeners might imagine the layout similar to a hospital or an assisted living facility where you have the large hallway, nurses station, and different rooms for the residents. And that was a lot of the facility was laid out like that. But we went into one particular area and the rooms were smaller and you kind of wind back and there was a bathroom. Oh my gosh. I couldn't wait to get away from that. I just did not like that at all. And I remember Jaffa's asking me and I'm like, oh, something about that bathroom. And I was really like, and she just kind of smiled. She didn't want to give me any information at the time, but I just thought, something about that whole area was just really off. And I had told you, if you recall, Jaffa, I'm like, yeah, we got to come back here.
Oh, I remember.
I was so gung ho. I'm like, oh yeah, we got to come back here. And we'll let you know what happened about those plans later on.
Well, there are a lot of what I want to call myths or stories or legends about Hillview Manor. In that particular area back towards that hallway, I have heard stories of potentially, unfortunately, a lady having some attacks as far as physical attacks, rapes, and so forth. I don't know, again, if I can confirm that, but it was in that hallway leading back towards that bathroom. And it is in an area also close to where there's a gentleman called Angelo, who, again, I've heard had committed suicide by hanging himself close to that area. So it's the potential that some of that residual energy remained in that area. I will say also the hallways were not very straight. And as we talk about energy, the energy can't flow very smoothly through that area. So I think some of that residual energy can become trapped there. And again, it's a little bit more concentrated. And maybe that's why it was so sensitive to Andrea that she could feel that.
Yeah. Another tidbit is the couple that we learned that was their little apartment that they stayed in, correct?
Right next to that area, yes.
Yeah, back in there. Mm-hmm. And they were not very nice people.
The Snyders, that's right.
Yeah, the Snyders.
Perry and Mary Snyder and their two children who lived at the home, they started there, I think in 1926 when it opened. They actually moved in there to help run the facility. And they were there until 1944 and their late 70s. So unfortunately, they were forced to retire. They were sort of accused of incompetency. And I think that it was maybe 3 weeks after that, they actually forced them out, gave them some time and said you needed to leave. Yeah.
There were accounts of mistreatment of residents and some cruelty.
Yes.
If I remember. Yeah. I didn't know all of this, when we arrived there that evening. So it was really interesting. It does really bring it home as far as, oh my goodness, you're in a place where there was, who knows what happened to these people. But also we want to remember that certainly there were happy times there too. Certainly residents had family members come and visit. They had birthdays and celebrations there. And certainly residents made friends with each other, and had friendly relations. So I think that for me, it helps to remember that certainly there was also that energy that had been present
Yes.
there at the facility.
And that's a good point to bring up. In fact, we'll talk a little bit later about a room we called the happy room.
Yes, the happy room.
Yeah, as soon as you walked in, you just had a wonderful, happy feeling. So
Oh, yeah.
I think we had the whole gamut of positive to negative type feelings throughout the facility.
Yeah. All right. So let's frame this because we went to a few different areas there in the facility, I think that we'll talk about. And we did mention also, we're going to share some recordings right here on the podcast and let you hear.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. What we call the EVPs. And that stands for what, Jofa?
Electronic voice phenomenon.
Yeah.
Which is my absolute favorite part of paranormal exploration. I think it's a real validation of something there beyond what we can see and hear with our own ears. And you've experienced that firsthand, Andrea. You know, I think you were a little shocked. It was great to see your eyes get as big as, saucers as soon as you heard that first one.
Yeah, that was a bit crazy. Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the equipment. What did we take? So we had flashlights, right? Just
Yes.
for us as individuals, because you got to be able to see. But what about the paranormal exploration stuff? What did you bring? You had a whole case.
I did. I brought everything along just so we could try some different things. The recorders, of course, are my favorite. So I had 2 digital recorders, one that ran the entire time we were there. And we were there for 6 hours. So I would do an hour or 2 of a recording and then turn it off and turn it back on right away so that we could catch something regardless of what was going on. Even if you and I were just sitting there chatting, you never know what you might hear. The second recorder was my original digital recorder called a DR60, which was a Panasonic, which is the one that we caught most of the recordings on. Not quite as clear, but we definitely got some there. We took along K2 meter. We took along a little thing called a periscope that responds to EMF changes. We took along a laser grid, if you remember all the dots on the wall.
Yes.
There was a lot of other equipment I had, but I really wanted Andrea to sit and experience and to feel and listen and hear, because I think you might remember me saying in a prior podcast, I spend so much time futzing around with the equipment that you miss things. So we really did try to take time to experience it for ourselves.
Yes. And I appreciated that because technology is great, I think, as an assistant, but certainly not as the main focus. I'm with you. I think it's distracting. And then I also think that after the fact, you have to go back through all of that stuff. And well, you might love it, Jofa, but I would think that that's a little, that's a lot of time.
It was 6 hours of investigating, and I went back and listened for another 6 hours. So it was like having the investigation all over again, plus the second recorder. So I had the opportunity to listen even beyond that. But I think it was well worth it because sometimes we didn't anticipate that we heard anything or were expecting anything. And then these little tiny EVPs just pop up here and there. So
yeah,
it was really exciting. So after we did our little walkthrough, we decided where exactly we were going to begin our adventure. And we picked a very long hallway on the first level. And the first thing before we started that, we did do a prayer of protection, which I always suggest that we do. We ask for communication in our highest and best good, but also for protection from anything that would be of a negative origin. And then we just went and sat and listened. And I think we did that for a good 10, 15 minutes, just listening what was happening.
Yes. I remember there was a wheelchair in that hallway and I sat in the wheelchair at one point, because there's no furniture really around. I mean, very sparse and that kind of thing. And you don't think about that really, but on these investigations, you might be sitting on the floor or just leaning against the wall or whatever you're doing. So I sat in the wheelchair for a bit. Jofa sat in a chair and we just kind of hung out there.
So while we were sitting there, we did have the recorders running the entire time because based on past history, I've had EVPs that will show up, just while we're sitting there quietly, like they want to start a conversation or maybe they want to interject something. So after we sat there for that 10, 15 minutes, we did listen back to some of the recordings and came across a couple interesting occurrences, on the recorder that we couldn't quite explain because we didn't hear them with our own ears.
Okay. Well, are you going to keep us in suspense?
Well, I think the first one that we heard, and Andrea, you actually sort of nailed what it was because I heard it on the recording and couldn't identify it, but there was this strange whistle.
Yes.
It had a little tune. I couldn't quite put it together what it was or where it came from. And then Andrea, after you listened back, you sort of identified it. And right away I was like, yes, that's what it is.
Yeah, this was such a strange thing. And I did not hear it at all as we sat there with my actual ears. But yeah, when I listened back to the recording, when it was all said and done, I went, I know that. And so let's go ahead. We'll play the recording for you to listen to, Kathleen, and all of our listeners. Let's play the recording and see if you can place it. Can you identify that, Kathleen? Does it sound familiar?
It most certainly does. I love it. What do you think it is, Andrea?
Well, I think it's the Old Spice jingle.
Yes. Yes.
The Old Spice jingle. Yeah. And so for comparison, let's play the Old Spice jingle. We'll play the actual recording of the Old Spice jingle now, and we'll let you decide. Well, what do you think?
It's identical. That's exactly what it is. Isn't that something? Oh my goodness. It was so clear. It was so clear. And you didn't hear this when you were there with your ears.
No.
Wow.
And it's so unique. It's so identifiable. You can't explain it at all because, again, we were the only two people there. And the other person who works there, it's his job to stay up there quiet and not to interfere in any way. So he was not anywhere near where we were at all. I don't know, Jofa, have you had anything like that before? What do you think?
I've had singing and whistling at other locations. In Gettysburg on a covered bridge called Sachs Covered Bridge. We had someone humming a song one time and it wasn't us. So yeah, sometimes they just interject something. And I thought that was a really pleasant thing to listen to. Nothing negative about it, just someone whistling a happy little tune, maybe something they remembered from their stay at Hillview Manor.
Yeah, maybe they used to get Old Spice every Christmas from their family or something. I don't know.
Or they watched a lot of TV.
Yeah, maybe they watched a lot of TV. That's right.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I recognize that right away. I just think that's amazing. It's so unexpected, as you said, Andrea. It's just, wow.
Yeah. And when you hear it on the recording and no, you did not hear it and you were right there next to the recorder, that puts a whole nother strange vibe to the whole thing because
agreed.
You have to then admit that things are happening around you that you are not perceiving with your senses. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So after we sat quietly, we did take a little walk down the hallway. And it was interesting because we both came through a section of the hallway where we almost did a double take and stopped and took a step back because it felt different. There was almost a very big cold spot. And you could tell there was almost that quiver up the back of your spine, not in a negative way, but you just knew something was there.
Yep. I remember that because I walked and, we're just quiet and I'm walking and I've got tingles and I'm cold and I glanced over at you in the dark and I'm thinking, what is happening? And I'm trying to work it out in my mind because there's no air conditioning there. Nothing's running to create a breeze or anything artificially cold. And I remember I started to say something to you, Joff, and you're like, oh, me too. So it was like, whoa, what is happening? And then I think for me, I think we had talked about, maybe moving on or what do we want to do next? And then we both said, I think we better stay here.
We did. And that's when we decided to start the recorder again and to introduce ourselves and hopefully get some sort of a response of who might be with us at that particular moment. But what was interesting is we didn't actually get someone else's name. we got one of our names as a response. Do you remember that?
I don't think I'll ever forget that, Jaffa.
I just wanted to interject that the visit you had was in August to, further put a finer point on the cold spot.
Yes. Oh, very good point, Kathleen. You're absolutely right. It was pretty warm that day. That's for sure. I think it was about 80 or low 80s that day.
So we listened back to the recording and I said, hello, my name is Jofa. And you said,
and I said, my name is Andrea.
And as we listened back to the recording, we got the response of someone saying, Andrea, as if introducing like, oh, hello, Andrea. Hearing your own name on a recording, I do have to admit, can make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, but it was a very nice Andrea. It wasn't anything negative about it. I think it was just acknowledging that you were new to this particular location and they wanted to welcome you.
Yeah, we'll choose to believe that, Jaffa. I'll take that. Okay. But in the moment, okay, it's freaky because you're in the dark, nobody's there, and the voice you do not recognize. And you know what? Let's just play it. We'll let everybody hear it and see what you think. And we'll probably play it a couple of times just so you can hear it and have a chance to re-listen. So I heard that and I was a bit freaked out. I'm going to admit it right here.
Goodness. Andrea, I would have been so freaked out because that is so clear. I can hear it. And to hear your name by this disembodied voice in a dark building, yeah, I can understand why you were a little put off.
I have to say, it makes it very real because there's an interaction there. There's an intelligent interaction. Probably most people know that sometimes energies or apparitions are just residual. And so sometimes we might experience what is old. It isn't there anymore. It's just kind of a tape player playing back. And so that's one thing that we might experience on a paranormal exploration. But this was not that. This was showing intelligence and that it was present with us in the hallway.
Yes.
And acknowledging that it listened to you and it wanted to say hello back, by repeating your name.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm thinking as I'm listening to this whole exchange and how you two came upon this, etc., is whoever it was singled out Andrea. So it makes me wonder, Jaffa, did they recognize you from your previous times there?
Good question.
It was simply that they wanted to recognize Andrea as a newcomer, but they were going, oh yeah, Jaffa's been here before. We're good.
And I have to admit,
right?
Jaffa's not necessarily a common name that they're probably like,
Correct.
Did I hear that correctly?
But that just makes me wonder. They already knew you from previous visits, but Andrea was a newcomer. Could be. Who knows, right?
Well, maybe they sensed that I was a little, I don't know if afraid is the word, but a little
intrigued.
Intrigued. We'll say that. I like that better. It's like, oh, she's a newbie. Let's freak her out. I don't know, but it was really something. And as I said, I'll never forget that. That's for sure.
I can imagine. Yeah, that would stay.
And interestingly, this all started in our first hour of being there, and we still have 5 more hours to go. So yeah, I think that was a great introduction to what we were going to experience and what was coming up ahead. So I think after that, we decided we did move down the hall to that atrium where it used to be like a TV room. They had a piano in there. And we chose to sit down. They had a little leather couch that was rather noisy. So we tried to sit as still as possible. But we did the same thing. Sat, listened, what did we feel, experience, see? And then we played the recorder back. And during that, at one point, I remember us saying, we didn't hear anything, like we didn't move. And I'm like, we didn't. And then we hear a whisper in the background say, yeah, like, yeah, they didn't move.
Uh-huh.
That's also very clear. I think you have that recording.
Yeah. Let's play that for you.
We didn't move at all. Mm-mm. We didn't move at all. Mm-mm. We didn't move at all. Mm-mm.
Wow, that's amazing. That is another instance of the intelligent energy interacting with you, not just residual energy. It's so interesting.
Yeah. And again, we didn't hear it with our ears. We had to have the recorder.
And I think it's interesting because it wasn't long after that. I even remember you and I having a conversation about they have to see us or hear us, even though we cannot see or hear them. So is it an interdimensional? Is it just they are existing in a realm that they can choose when to come in and come out so that they can participate in these explorations and give some sort of, validation that they're there? It just opens up so many questions. Why is it that they can respond to us, but we don't hear them, so we can respond to them? I don't think it's a negative feeling when you know someone is there responding to you. If anything, I found it very comforting.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, because I think it's definitely proof that you're still around, after the physical body. So I could see where that would be reassuring, along those lines for sure.
So what happened next, Jaffa? Where did you guys go after that?
We spent more time in this long hallway. And interestingly enough, at Hillview, there's been reports of hearing a dog bark in the building. So we decided to sit and see if we could do a recording and if we could possibly get the dog on a recording. So Andrea started off by saying, does the dog do any tricks?
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't hear anything.
I thought, hey, that's a pretty good question, So I was all excited, like, oh, something's going to happen. But yeah, I said, does the dog know any tricks? And we waited and waited. And then I said, how about speak? And I didn't hear anything with my ears. Jaffa didn't hear anything with her ears. We waited, and then she played it back. And here's what came through.
Wow. Was that what I thought I heard? It sounded like woof, woof, but deeper.
We think someone was just sort of imitating the dog. I'm not sure that that was an actual ghost dog, if you want to call it that, but
yeah, I can see what you mean now, as far as it sounded like someone kind of obliging Andrea when she said speak. So they said, sure, woof, woof.
Again, what a nice, humorous response,
Yeah, yeah. But it's so loud and unmistakable.
It is.
And it wasn't just once, but twice in succession like that. I mean,
yeah,
not random. Yeah, something happened and it seemed to respond.
And it's that intelligent response. I know I keep mentioning this, but I find that so interesting because from what I know of paranormal investigations is a lot of the energy that's encountered is that residual. But you and Jaffa, during your adventure, you were getting a lot of interaction, like actual live interaction.
Again, I think it was the intention. We went in with a positive intention and we're getting positive, very happy responses, kindly obliging us and being able to provide Andrea with, her first experience. I think these were great interactions with whomever or whatever was there.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Kind of playful.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Like, hey, welcome, Andrea. Let's have some fun, right?
Yeah.
I have to say, I wish we could say the entire night was like that. We did have a section where the responses were a little bit more foreboding, maybe is the word we want to use. So if
Okay.
you'd like to hear about that, I'll take you to the next location.
Of course.
We decided not to do Perry and Mary's apartment. We both just had this, again, intuition that we probably shouldn't go there. And I always listen to my gut. If it says don't go, I'm not going to go. But there was a very long hallway on the second level that we chose to go to.
I just wanted to interject really quickly that remember I had said, Kathleen, when we went into that bathroom area and that other area was like, ooh, I don't like this at all, but we got to come back later, because I thought this is what we're
Right.
here for. And that was that area. But as the night went on, that became less exciting to me. I just started to feel like, yeah, I don't really want to go there. And I was a bit conflicted over that because I thought, well, if I'm here to do a paranormal exploration, I would want to go to where the activity might really be. And I remember, Jofa, you and I had a bit of a conversation about this while we were there. And you brought up the fact that when we went in, when we stated our intention and said that prayer, that we would experience whatever was in our highest good. And when you brought that up, it was like, yes, I thought in my mind, that is probably why I went from, yay, yeah, let's do that, from my thinking mind. And then as the night wore on, it just didn't feel right to go. It probably wasn't in our highest good to go to that area.
I agree. And I do think that my intention was certainly not to put you in any location that was going to cause any sort of stress or trauma or, negative energy. That's really not what we were there for. And I did feel that location had something that didn't necessarily want us there anyway. And if we were there, they wanted to let us know they were in charge. So we just avoided that whole area.
And there was plenty to keep us busy.
Oh, yes.
It sounds like it, but that's good. I mean, the intention is so powerful and it sounds like it really served you well. And I'm happy about that.
Well, we did go to what is known as the noisy hall, which is on the second level. It's known for being able to sit there and you hear all sorts of noises, bangs and footsteps and doors and all sorts of things. So we sat and listened for a while there and also did the recordings. And in that hallway, we did receive responses that I hear, unfortunately, a good amount of time when we're on our explorations. But this was a little different. The responses had to do with get out of here or get out. And I've heard that before. And sometimes it's just a grumpy spirit that doesn't want to be bothered with someone coming in, asking them all sorts of questions. But I told Andrea, this felt different. It felt more of a warning, more of a, you shouldn't be here, not we don't want you here, but you shouldn't be here. And we did catch at least one of those that I think was clear enough that your guest could make it out.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
We had a few, you're right, but not all of our EVPs come out really clear. We've picked a good sample of that, but yeah, it was a repeated message. So yeah, let's listen to that a couple of times.
Well, I heard that and it did not sound friendly. I agree with Jaffa. That was, I could hear the warning in that.
I think we stayed maybe a few minutes just to listen and see if there was anything else going on, but we did oblige them only because, again, it wasn't our intent to stir up any trouble or cause any feelings. We thank them for the warning. We thank them for, allowing us to be there. And then we went off to another area. If you do remember, though, Andrea, during that, we did hear things going on down the hallway, banging and, footsteps and so forth. So that noisy hallway did live up to its reputation. And we did get some of that on recordings, but I don't know that just hearing banging in the distance is really worth repeating. But
They'll have to just take our word for it.
yeah, but it was an interesting hallway.
It was. And, thinking back now to the experience, the first hallway we talked about in the show, and then this one, very different vibe, very different energy. That second hallway, the get out of here hallway, it was almost like there was a bit of scurrying around, in the shadows. It just felt like there were things there that we couldn't really see. There was movement, and there was that whole different feeling there for sure.
It certainly wasn't our intention to, cause any spirit or entity that did reside there. We didn't want to come in and cause them any discomfort, by us being there or asking questions and so forth. So between what appeared to be a warning and us just having this empathy of we don't want to cause any more stress in what already feels like a stressful hallway, we chose to go to our next location, which I love the name of this. During our initial walk, we came into this room and Andrea sort of gave it the name, the happy room. So we chose to go to the happy room.
Yes. I remember when we did our walkthrough and Jofa had asked me, just give me your impressions of the rooms. I loved this room. It had windows. It just seemed so open. And I remember going in and just saying all of these things. And I remember telling Jofa, I said, I bet this was the most popular room in the whole place. And I said, you can see the front door. I said, imagine all the residents that would reside in this room. They could have the view of the windows and the trees and all, but they could see everybody coming and going through the front door. Can you imagine that? I mean, what a power room, right? They could see the delivery people, and I imagined the residents in that room saying, oh, look, Myrtle's little son who never comes to visit. He showed up today. Oh, I wonder what he wants. Can you imagine the chitter chatter that potentially go on there? But it was just such a great room. I just had a wonderful feeling there. So yeah, I named it the happy room. And so after the get out experience, up there, we searched out the happy room then.
I don't blame you. It sounds like a good place to be. So the happy room was actually a resident room. It wasn't like a gathering area or a common area.
Correct.
Okay.
There was a common area right next door to it, which is interesting that you bring that up. So they, again, probably in addition to looking out the window and seeing people coming and going, they probably could have seen people going in and out of the common room, with visitors and friends. It was a hub of activity.
Yeah, a lot of activity. Gossip Central, probably.
Yes. And the room had been set up for 4 beds, I think. Am I remembering that correctly, Jofa?
I believe so.
Yeah, but it was a nice room.
We did the same thing there. We always do. We sat for a little bit, but then we also, introduced ourselves and asked some questions. And I remember, Andrea, you mentioning beforehand, but you felt that there had been an Edna there. And you asked the question, is there an Edna here, or is your name Edna? And do you remember what happened after that?
I don't think I heard anything.
We didn't hear anything, but when we played back, we had someone respond.
Oh, right.
My name is, but I can't quite make out the name. It's either Alan or Alvin or something Alma. But we do have that recording as well.
All right. Well, let's take a quick listen.
So what do you think? It's either Alma or Alvin or Alan, that's the only thing I feel bad that we couldn't actually make out the name.
I know. I wish it would be nice to get that. But yeah, I'm not sure. You've got some great ideas there. I think they're all contenders, but.
I think so too. But you can definitely hear my name is. And that's, again, a response to a question.
Yeah.
They were very obliging, Andrea, to you.
They were. Yeah. Now, we also took photos during our exploration there too, Jofa. I just used my phone to take the photos. I remember you said, just don't take one, take a few in succession so you can compare them. And we actually got something in the happy room. You found that when you went back through all those photos.
We did. And it's interesting because I had not seen any orbs on any other photos.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one location where we did have an orb in the photo that was a little different than just a speck of dust or an insect or something to that effect. It seemed to radiate its own light. We do have that photo, which may have been the person that was trying to tell us what their name was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're only audio. So what do? Jofa is posting this photo and all the EVPs from this episode on her website. So you'll be able to go there and see this orb for yourself, make up your own mind, and listen to those EVPs again if you want to. Let us know what you think.
What a great idea. I love that. I did see that photo. I did have a glimpse of it initially, and I have to say I was impressed. There's no question in my mind that that was an orb, just as you said.
Yeah, it was really intriguing. And it was a series of 3 photos. And the first photo, nothing. Then the second one right after, there it is, smack dab. And it looks like it's hovering over the floor. And then the third photo is just like the first one. So it appeared and then disappeared very quickly.
Yeah, so interesting. What a wonderful experience. I mean, overall, it feels very positive. And I think for me, hearing about it now, I would have guessed incorrectly, I may add, that it would have been not as positive, a little more frightening, a little more negative, I guess. But I don't get that feel at all. You had interactions. It felt like you were welcomed for the most part. I just think it's so wonderful. What an amazing experience to have.
It was really something.
And now we're anxious to take Kathleen with us so she can experience it firsthand.
Yes.
I'd love to. I am very much interested in going. I was before, and even more so now. So I would love the opportunity to do it again. And you guys will be old hands at this, and I'll be the scared newbie.
Well, then they'll say your name instead of my name. How about that?
Oh, I can hardly wait.
Well, I will say Andrea took to this like a duck to water. I did not see any true fear, or if you had questions, she was very inquisitive. And I just thought it was a real pleasure for a first timer. I like to call you a virgin explorer, but it was wonderful. I'm glad that you had such a positive experience because that's not, like I said, I'm not looking to take people. If you want the scratches, if you want the growls and all these other negative things, there's certainly people out there that want the same thing. And those are the ones that I would suggest that you do a paranormal exploration with.
Mm-hmm.
I truly just want to introduce people to the fact that there's way more out there than what you see, than what you hear. You can feel it. You can interact with it. And I do believe I've mentioned before in my prior podcast that the paranormal is what opened me up to my spirituality. It's the first thing that opened my universe up to say there's way more there than what we can truly acknowledge. And it put me on a path to a deeper understanding of the universe, to my own spirituality. Happy to share it with other people because I do think it is life-changing.
Yeah, that was the gateway for you. It wasn't Reiki. Reiki wasn't your gateway. It was the paranormal.
That's true.
People find their path in any number of ways, and it's really amazing.
It is. It is. And one thing I would like to circle back to before we conclude is the topic of helping spirits cross over. You touched upon that at the beginning. I think it's important that we address that briefly for those who may be wondering, why didn't you do that? What are your thoughts about that, Andrea?
Well, yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, it was a little bit of a conflict with me because here we are almost like customers going to this place and renting it out for us to interact with these spirits. And so before we went, I was kind of reflecting about that and wondering about that, asking myself how I felt about it, I reconciled it because I thought, every spirit, no matter if they're in body or out of body, has free will. So spirits can decide. And it isn't really up to me to decide for any spirit what might be best for them. And, we are caught in this paradigm of time. Spirit really isn't. If we can agree that we are eternal beings, then perhaps spending a few decades at Hillview Manor, if that is their choice to do, who am I to say that that's right or wrong? But I will say, at the end of our exploration, when we were in the happy room, I did feel moved to present out loud a bit of I wouldn't call it a ceremony or anything like that, but sort of bringing in the light, calling the light to us there in the happy room, and saying a few words with respect and reverence and inviting the illumined beings, to come down to that space and talking to whatever spirits were there in a compassionate way. And I just lovingly invited them to remember that anyone ready to go to the light, there would be help for them and they could choose to cross over if they decided that they were ready to do that. Again, respecting free will. I don't want to say anything's right or wrong, but just a simple reminder to them that they do have choice and that there is light for them in a different way if they wanted to make a decision at that point.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And what a beautiful way to end with the expression of bringing in the light. And also, knowing you, Andrea, I imagine that you offered some gratitude as well for the opportunity to do that. Jofa, you too. I know you both, and I'm sure that was part of it. It is important, and I agree with you 100%, Andrea, that free will always comes into play, and we have no idea why spirits hang around. We don't know. They may be working on their own healing in that area. There may be some fear involved. We just don't know. The possibilities are endless as to why spirits remain earthbound.
You could feel the entire room was lighter and brighter after she did that. So it was a lovely feeling. And I know at the end of all of our investigations and explorations, we always acknowledge and thank them for any interactions that they did have with us. But we do also tell them they cannot come home with us.
Yeah.
They must remain where they're at. We don't know why, as you mentioned, but they were not allowed to attach to us or come home for further interactions. But again, we did make sure that we express gratitude. Very important.
This has been just so interesting to me. And I think our listeners will agree that, wow, what a wonderful maiden voyage for you, Andrea.
Oh, yeah, it was really something. I was really thinking about that for some time afterwards. Yeah, for sure.
I bet.
Looking forward to connecting with Jofa again for the recording of the show and for you to hear about it firsthand and let you hear all those EVPs, which, wow.
They are amazing. The impact of those, I think, cannot be understated. It's just that there is intelligence there. This is an interaction. This is actually happening in real time, real Earth time, that is, right?
Yeah.
It's just so amazing and fascinating and intriguing. And I love everything about that. Jofa, thank you very much for organizing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
And Andrea, I appreciate you taking one for the team, so to speak.
Oh, it was just terrible.
To Hillview Manor. I can tell you're just so distraught.
Oh, I know. No, you know what? I would do it again, but I have to tell you, I would want Jofa to take me.
After hearing this, yeah, definitely.
It's funny because you might think that leading up to going to Hillview Manor, maybe I checked out some of those TV shows, the paranormal. I have to say I did, kind of think, well, maybe I should do some homework and watch these shows. And I remember tuning into a couple of them and I just couldn't do it. The approach that, at least the shows that I tuned into, the approach just didn't really resonate with me. And I am a fan of Jofa because she comes from the spiritual side. And she's so organized and she's so just positive about the whole thing. But as I said, she takes care of all the details. And I mean this in the most loving way, Jofa. I have to say that. It's like you're the mother hen. You take care of all the stuff. Yeah, I would do this again, but I would want you to be the leader, the organizer, and the facilitator, because I know that it would be the highest vibe, I guess is what I'm going to say. And for the highest good, not just casting a net out there for whatever. And I think that level of consciousness it's what the spirit deserves. And so I would say that. And so speaking of that, Jofa, when might we go again? Do you have some events coming up that we might explore with you?
I do have some paranormal events coming up. As a matter of fact, Halloween weekend, October 28th, 29th, and 30th, we're holding an entire weekend at the Cashtown Inn, which is right outside Gettysburg. And the entire weekend is just a paranormal weekend. Everyone that will be at the Cashtown Inn is going to be part of this event. So we will all be sharing each other's rooms, doing a little paranormal investigation. And being so close to Gettysburg, I'm sure people will take some time to go in and explore the battlefield and the town itself. In November, I have an event at the Old Harriman Hospital in Harriman, Tennessee. That's a 10-hour investigation of a large hospital. And I will tell you, we did one earlier this year and got some photos that one of my team members took a photo, and you see these legs with what could be a body at the top, but the legs are very, very distinguishable. Not only did we take other photos to compare, but the facility itself has security cameras, and they verified no one was at that location at the time that photo was taken. So had some great EVPs. That's a great place to go. The day after that, November 19th, we're doing Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary prison in Petros, Tennessee. Been there many times. We're going back to the Old Harriman Hospital in April of next year. I'm only taking 8 people. And then our big paranormal trip is May of 2023, when we're doing a 10-day mystical tour of Scotland. We're just taking 20 people. And we have 3 locations where we will be the only group exploring 2 castles, the Balgony Castle and Castle Fraser. And then we're also doing a night of 6 hours under Edinburgh in the vaults.
Wow. Do the EVPs come back with Scottish accents?
Oh, that's a good question. I would hope so.
Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah. You'll have to report back.
We've had EVPs in German before, a bed and breakfast in York, Pennsylvania, that had some German immigrants that ran or lived in that home. And the EVPs were in German. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a little Scottish accent to our EVPs over there.
Oh, that's just a whole nother layer of interesting, I think. That's exciting, Jofa. You've got a lot of things coming up, and they can just go to your website, spiritedeventsbyjofa.com. and find out all the information. Is that correct?
Yes. I'll be adding some more events for 2023 as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jofa, for the trip, for the organization, for your patience with me, and for coming back to tell Kathleen all about it and talk about it with me as well and share it with our audience.
Thank you both.
Thanks so much, Jofa. I really appreciate it. It was great seeing you again, for one thing. And hopefully the next time we meet, it will be maybe at Hillview.
Yes. Join me in the dark. I would love to take you.
We thank you again for joining us. And of course, we invite you to join us next time as we journey beyond the Reiki Gateway with Kathleen Johnson and Andrea Kennedy.